Hello and welcome to Diecast Diaries. I'm Dan, and in this video I thought I'd have a look at some more military models after having had a break from that with the last few that I've done. But instead of having a look at some more military vehicles, I thought I'd have a look at some military vessels in the form of the large-scale naval craft released by Dinky Toys in the 1970s. Now, Dinky had quite an extensive military range in the 70s, not only the boats that I'm going to be able to look at in this video, but quite an extensive range of tanks, guns, vehicles, and also quite an extensive range of aircraft as well, both things that I'm intending on doing videos on in the future. Another feature of Dinky in the 70s was a lot of the models they released tended to be kind of larger scales than they had been previously. And there was also quite an emphasis on working features. So in the case of the military models, if a gun could fire shells or a missile be launched, invariably it did. And I'm pleased to say that the boats were no exception. So the first one is this one, which Dinky called the motor patrol boat. I always kind of thought of this as a torpedo boat myself, but the advert at the back there has quite a bit of emphasis on the fact it fires missiles, so maybe it's actually a missile boat. Well, this one was released in 1973. It was actually be the longest lived of all the boats that they did. The release pattern's kind of a bit odd. They weren't kind of all released together. You had this one and one of the others released in 73, and then the others kind of followed, like one kind of coming out each year. And some of them kind of only lasted sort of 2 years, but I have to say this one's the longest lived, sort of lasting for 4 years in the catalogue. But yeah, it's a really nice sort of quite a hefty die-cast model. Obviously, you know, it just don't really need to point out these are simply not meant for going in the bath. They will just sink like a stone. But they've got wheels underneath for sort of going along the carpet nicely. But yeah, really sort of nicely finished. This is all, apart from the sort of little bits like the sort of the boat, the guns, the mast, little bits like that, it's all die cast. As I say, it's got some really nice sort of heft to it. Now, this boat, it's actually quite an unusual one for Dinky to have chosen. It is a Vosper, with Vosper being a famous company who made like torpedo boats in the Second World War, things like that, and a lot of other naval craft. So it is a British-built boat, but it's not one that was actually used by the Royal Navy. Vospers have built a lot of boats, fast attack craft, things like that, for export to countries where they don't have their own shipbuilding capacity, or they don't want to operate or can't afford to operate larger scale naval craft like destroyers and things like that. So there was an awful lot of these sorts of boats built, as I say, purely for export. And in the case of this one, it's actually one that was supplied to the Malaysian Navy. One nice feature of these Dinky boats is that not only are all of them representations of real craft, but with the numbers that Dinky have chosen for them, they actually represent individual vessels, which I think is quite a nice touch. So P153 was actually, as I say, delivered to the Malaysian Navy, where it was named Pendekar. It was delivered in 1967 along with 3 sister ships. One of the sister ships actually is one that Tamiya released a model of, the Perkasa. But yeah, these were delivered to the Malaysian Navy, and they were in service until about, I think, the late 70s. Not a lot of kind of service history I've kind of been able to sort of find out about them. I'm guessing Dinky chose it because, as I say, it was a British-made boat, and they certainly look nice. I think they look sort of really sort of impressive, you know, little vessels. But yeah, it's quite an unusual one in theory for Dinky to do. They were based on an original British design, the Royal Navy Brave class, of which I think a couple entered service with the Royal Navy. But as I say, these particular ones, there were others supplied to other countries. But as I say, this one represents a Malaysian one. And yeah, so the working feature on this one, as it's pretty obvious because it's got 2 great big sort of red missiles sticking out of it, is that these fire. Now, I've got a couple of books on Dinky Toys that kind of list all the models that they released and sort of notes on working features and stuff like that. And for all of this range, most of them did have a working feature of some form or another. It kind of referred to them having quite ineffectual firing mechanisms, but I was having a bit of a practice with this before I kind of started doing my video. And to be honest, I was actually sort of quite impressed at how good they were. So I will have a quick go at firing them now. So it's the black bit on the top there that you kind of press down to launch them. and we'll just aim at the back. And you can probably hear from the noise that made and the fact it's completely pinged out of shot. I'll just fire the other one. There we go. That's actually pretty effective. Now this is what the missiles look like, and then it's just a spring-mounted launcher. Oops, bit of a fiddle. There we go. So you get it on there, push it back in, and it slots into place. We'll just get the other one. I'll just kind of load that one as well. You probably got this one. I'll say I've got 2 missiles with this one. You probably got a couple of spares with it when it was brand new. But yeah, I actually thought I was actually quite pleasantly surprised when I kind of fired that one at the back. It does pack a bit of a punch. Certainly not one that you would want to get in the way of, and certainly not a toy that would probably pass health and safety standards now. So yes, that's the first one that was released. That's the motor patrol boat, as Dinky called it. Now, in the same year, 1973, they also released this one. It's the SRN-6 hovercraft, or the military version, I should say, of the SRN-6 hovercraft. This was a repaint of a civilian version that they did. They've made a couple of alterations to it. Obviously, the civilian version doesn't have a plastic machine gun on the front. The radar is mounted at the front on the civilian one, obviously to accommodate the gun. They've just moved it back. This one wasn't technically released as part of the sort of range of small boats. The model number that Dinky gave it, 281, is completely out of sync with the rest of the numbers. I think this was just intended as just part of the military range in general, but I tend to think of it as part of the same series, with it being, all right, it's a hovercraft, so it can go on land, but it's mostly a watercraft. And again, this one represents a specific vessel, so not as catchy name as the other one, but this XV614 was one operated by the Royal Corps of Transport, part of the British Army. Sort of delivered in the late 60s, and I'm not sure kind of how many of them they used, how successful they were. The SRN-6 itself was a very successful hovercraft, kind of the really first real successful commercial hovercraft. But yeah, this one eventually, I've not been able to find out a huge amount about its service history, but it was eventually sold off to the Egyptian Navy. Tried to kind of do a bit of research on that, but there really wasn't a lot on Egyptian Navy hovercrafts out there. So, but yeah, so again, it's nice to know that it is a real hovercraft. And on this one, same as the civilian version, it's got an opening hatch at the front, so that's where all the crew and passengers would board. And it does have a nice working feature in that when you push it along, the propeller goes round. And similar to the, all the boats in this series, there's a lot of metal content with this. So all of the top bit here is metal, the base is metal, the skirt's plastic, and obviously things like the door and the other little bits. But this white bit on the top, that's metal as well. So again, it's got some nice weight to it. This sort of type of hovercraft, there's a few models of it kind of produced by, Dinky did obviously this one, they did the civilian version. Matchbox also did a couple of versions. They did one in their sort of smaller size range. They did a Super Kings version, and they also did a Battle Kings version, their own military range from the 70s, something else I'll be doing a video on. So yeah, so it's quite a well sort of modelled vehicle, or vessel, whatever you want to call it. So yes, that's the SRN-6 hovercraft military version. Now this one was, as I say, also introduced in 1973, but this one would be deleted 3 years later in 1976. But yeah, it's a nice one. Now this one actually has rubber tyres underneath, so it's even smoother kind of along the carpet. But yeah, it's a nice one, that. And then in 1974, they released this one. It's the Air Sea Rescue Launch. Now, this is the only one where I'm not 100% certain it is a proper, sort of a real representation of an actual boat. The front end certainly is. This is a post-war, again, it's a Vosper. It represents a rescue and target towing launch, as used by the RAF. Introduced kind of from about the mid-50s, and I think in service till about the late 70s. Now, the real ones actually had a grey superstructure as opposed to a yellow one, but I can kind of see why Dinky did it with the yellow. It looked really eye-catching, and it is kind of appropriate for a rescue sort of vessel. Now, there is one of these, or clearly the vessel it's based on, at the RAF Museum at Hendon in North London. The front end is, and the sort of shape of the superstructure is definitely kind of the same. What makes me think it is just a made up one to a degree is the fact that they've basically just reused the hull and the rear part of the superstructure off the patrol boat. So if you have a look there, it's exactly the same. But just like I say, just the front end being different. And I think I have seen some of these where both model names have been listed underneath. But it's I think making the most out of the mould. It's a nice model. The only thing with this one is because it can't really have any working features. Obviously, the gun turns at the back. Not sure orange was the best colour, but obviously it kind of matches the other bits they've done on it. But what this one did come with is a tiny little pilot in his dinghy. Of course, the issue with this one being, because that's not attached to the boat in any way, as soon as you open it out of the box, this would invariably just go missing. And the first one of these was bought from a toy fair back in the mid-90s, I think it was. The actual boat was in really good condition. I think it cost me about a £5, but of course, it was years later I realised it was actually supposed to come with the little dinghy. And it's only actually, I think it was last year, I finally managed to find one. All right, there are mint box ones out there, but I didn't want to have to pay for a mint box one. I managed to find this one in really good unboxed condition, and amazingly, with the little pilot in his raft, desperately waving for help. So yeah, so no kind of working features as such, but it's nice to get the little raft and the pilot. No doubt, extremely relieved to see a yellow and black boat looming over the horizon. So we'll put that there. So yeah, so that was the Air Sea Rescue launch, and that one was in the range for 3 years, from 1974 to 1977. Now this next one is actually probably the most impressive in the range. It's certainly the largest, and Dinky just called it the Mark I Corvette. And this was released in 1975. It would last for 2 years in the range, sort of being deleted in 1977. Now this is a ship that I kind of thought must be based on a real one, but Mark I Corvette was a bit vague. I've done a bit of research on it, and it turns out it is a real ship. It's another one built by Vosper, and it's another one built for export. In the case of this one, it's actually one supplied to the Ghanaian Navy. There was this one and a sister ship that was supplied to Ghana. Now, F-17 actually equates to, there was a ship called the Cremancy, which was supplied to Ghana in, bear with me a second, it was in 1964. F-18 being its sister ship, which was called Keta, K-E-T-A. Now, again, similar to the Malaysian patrol boat, a kind of really random one for Dinky to do. Obviously, the Ghanaian Navy is pretty obscure to begin with. Neither ship had a very kind of exciting service life. They were both kind of scrapped by the end of the 80s, partly due to kind of poor maintenance, I think, and probably lack of funding to be able to sort of run them. But whether it's because it was the largest type of ship they could do that would kind of fit in with the rest of the range, I'm not sure. I have to say, I think it's a really nice model. Some really nice detail on it. I suppose it's not the most heavily armed ship. You've got, I think it's a 4-inch gun at the front. You've got what I'm guessing is supposed to be like an Oerlikon anti-aircraft gun at the back. And then at the stern, an anti-submarine mortar. But some really nice detail with the radar, with the lifeboats on it. And again, it's got some really nice sort of weight to it. Now this boat, as I say, obviously it's another one with a nice working feature. Now, what I found with this one is it's actually quite sensitive. Again, when I was having a bit of a practice with this before I started doing my video, I was having a bit of a go with this one. So the missiles are actually kind of not primed. I didn't want them to ping off while I was in the middle of talking about it. So I'll just put them back in. There we go. And then it launches by, there we go. You sort of waggle it from side to side. It's probably the worst of the three. Of the four that do kind of have working features. See, that one's kind of not coming out at all. These are different projectiles. They've got this bit also to make them sort of like latch into the bottom of the sort of mortar. But yeah, it is pretty sensitive. But I will put the two back in there. Not sure where the third one's gone. I will locate it after the video. But yes, that's the Mark I Corvette, as I say, representing F-17 Chromancy from the Ghanaian Navy. Not often you get to have a model of a ship from the Ghanaian Navy. And then in 1976, they released this one, which is the Russian Osa-2 missile boat. Now, again, I've done a bit of research on this one. I always used to think it was OSA as opposed to OSA, but apparently OSA is Russian for Wasp, which I suppose is quite an appropriate name for a fast attack craft. And again, now, I've had a look. There was one that had 175 on the side. I don't think they ever had actual individual names. Russia built hundreds of these. They used them extensively themselves. They were also extensively used by other Warsaw Pact countries in their navies, and also quite a few sort of third world countries. Seen action with the Egyptians against the Israelis, and then sort of, I think, in a few other sort of battles and sort of wars, conflicts as well. So it's quite a widely used boat. And as you can see with this one, it actually has 4 missiles. So the armament on the boat is, I think it's a couple of, when I was doing a bit of research on this, I think it said they were 30mm turrets. And what I was quite surprised to find out is they're actually unmanned. So I'm guessing kind of remotely operated. This one does have a revolving, I'm guessing it's supposed to be like a radar. And then you've got kind of a bit of a slightly fragile mast. But yeah, so this one, now again, when I was having a bit of a practice, not all the launchers work as well as each other. I think I found that this one was the best. So I'll just try it. There we go. And that has flown to the other side of the room. So I can safely say that one is another one that's not as ineffectual as the Dinky Toys book would make it out to be. So yes, that's the Russian Osa-2 missile boat. Now these 5 were all released in this style of box. Quite a few models from the Dinky military range of the 70s were released in this style of box. So there's quite a few of the military vehicles that were, and quite a few of the aircraft. So it's basically like a cardboard underneath, and then like a plastic sort of bubble on top. £22 is what the hovercraft cost me. That was a few years ago. So yes, they were all, released in this sort of style box. But the final boat to be released was released in the standard sort of window box. And that's this one, which Dinky just called the Submarine Chaser. Now, it was, again, quite a while before I realised that this was based on a real ship. It's quite an unusual one in this case because it's actually a US Navy fast attack hydrofoil. There were 6 ships of the Pegasus class, and they all sort of came into service in the sort of early 80s. So it's a very current ship for Dinky to have done a model of it. Maybe that's why they chose it. It does also explain what these kind of bits are on the side. These would be where the rearmost foils would be. The front foil kind of sticks out sort of directly below the bow, so it wouldn't be apparent on this kind of model. But yeah, having had a look, it's unmistakable. The 76mm gun turret is identical, shape of the superstructure, the quite distinctive radar and the mast. It's yeah, definitely what it is. And also the number on the side, number 2, it is USS Hercules. So as I say, there were 6 ships in the class. They were fairly successful. They were used for a lot of like patrol and interdiction of kind of drugs and things like that. Also, there's not many things going to outrun these. They've got a top speed of about 50 knots, I think. But I think they were quite expensive to run. So they've kind of been sort of phased out of service by the end of the 90s. And sadly, today, only one of them actually survives, USS Ares, which is now a museum ship. USS Gemini managed to be purchased and was converted into what must have been quite a striking looking luxury yacht. But that too has sadly since come to the scrap man. But it's another really nice detailed one. You can see it's even got the windscreen wipers on the bridge windows there. I think this one is my favourite of the range. Not only do I really like the actual real life ship, but I think the working feature on this one is really good. Because they called it a submarine chaser, it's equipped with a depth charge launcher, and I think this tends to work pretty well. So I'll just pop it down, and you kind of rotate the wheel, and it will ping off the depth charges. There we go. The only problem is they do tend to sort of wobble about a bit. There we go. ping that one out, and the last one, and I'll pick those up in a bit. The only thing I will say is that that's kind of Dinky's own invention, giving this a depth charge launcher. The real vessels would have had anti-ship missile launchers on the back, but I quite like it. I suppose you've already got two of the range that sort of launch missiles. I quite like the fact that they've given this, and I think it's a really fun feature, the fact it pings off. And again, it's another one, I think it works really well. It certainly pinged those sort of a fair distance away, so luckily they're bright yellow, so they shouldn't be too difficult to find. But yeah, now this one was the last one that was introduced. It was introduced in 1978, only actually lasted for a year. So all the boats were gone by 78. Of course, Dinky themselves would be gone within the sort of couple of years after that. I'm not really sure how successful these boats were. I like them. I think it's a really nice range. As I say, they all represent real boats. I suppose the problem with toy boats, and this is something I'll be touching upon. I'm going to be doing a video on the Matchbox Sea Kings range that they had in the 70s. The problem is you kind of want them to float, whereas Dinky obviously want them to be kind of robust. I suppose want them to be more in line with what they do, which is obviously diecast. As I say, there's absolutely no chance of these floating. So it's whether you want to sort of like play with boats along the carpet. They are roughly, I would say, the same scale. I'm going to guess it's roughly about 1:87, something like that. So they look pretty good altogether. But I suppose it's a fair sort of mishmash of different boats. You've got, all right, a Malaysian one, a couple of British ones, a Ghanaian one, a Russian one, and an American one. But I suppose it's a nice mix of, certainly in this case, what would have been sort of very current vessels. So as I say, that was released in 77 and only lasted until 78 when it was withdrawn. And I'd say this one came in just a standard window box. I'm guessing it's because it's quite narrow. It does obviously stand up okay, but it's more wobbly. It's not as stable as the others. Also, it's got quite a tall mast, and I'm thinking that the bubble might not have been kind of tall enough to cover it, so they just thought it was safer to kind of release it in a window box. But yeah, so that's the Dinky boats released between 1973 and 1977. So yeah, as I say, I'm quite a fan of the range myself. I think they've got some really sort of cool features, and I like the fact that Dinky had started to use a lot more plastic in some of their models, so you've got more detail, as I say, particularly with this one where you've got the lifeboats, and I mean the sort of little davits. They're quite fragile, but I think it makes for an excellent model. And it's also introduction of more plastic, but not to the detriment of doing away with it being sort of made out of die-cast. As I say, there's still really, really heavy models. So yeah, sort of really nice. I don't think they're particularly difficult to find. The most I've paid for one was, I have this one. This one's boxed, and that cost me, I think, £25. Admittedly, that was a while ago, maybe 20 or so years ago. I also have the boxes for the Russian one and for the motor torpedo boat. Unfortunately, the only box I could find easily was the one for the hovercraft. You can see, as I say, that one cost me £22. So they're not ridiculously expensive. As I say, that might be a reflection of the fact that they weren't particularly popular models. There was one last one that Dinky kind of, if you look at kind of lists of these models in like Dinky books, things like that, there's one other one that gets lumped in with these, which is the Coast Guard amphibious missile launch. Now, it's quite a bizarre looking thing. It's not one I have. It's not one I'm particularly bothered about picking up. I remember seeing it in the catalogue and thinking, what is that? It was like quite clearly not a real vessel of any kind. Turns out it was going to be part of a new TV programme. Dinky did quite a few TV-related models. They did like Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, things like that. And I think they were trying to get ahead of the game. Maybe it was trying to make one last hurrah, because obviously Dinky was starting to struggle in the 70s. They produced this missile launch that was, I think, featured in a pilot episode. Unfortunately, the programme never went ahead, so Dinky were kind of stuck with this weird sort of contraption. It's like a sort of it looks like a four-wheel boat, basically, with like a jet engine mounted on the back and a missile launcher that pops up. So it's a really kind of weird-looking thing. I think Dinky probably just went ahead and produced it anyway because, as I say, by the end of the 70s, they were probably desperate to get anything out as a way of kind of staving off going into administration. Sadly, of course, as we know, it wasn't successful. So yeah, so that's the only other one. But yeah, I've not kind of wanted to pick it up. It's not a real boat. So yeah, I don't really, although Dinky do, I don't really class it as part of the range. But yeah, overall, as I say, I think it's a pretty nice range. As I say, it ties in quite nicely with the other military stuff that they did of this era, the kind of style of construction, the detail that they do, the working features. So, as I say, that the military vehicles, tanks, things like that, I've got quite a few of those I'll be doing a video on at some point. And also the aircraft that they did, again, most of which had working features and were kind of certainly considerably larger than other aircraft that Dinky had done in the past. But yeah, for now, I'll leave this one there. So please do like, share, subscribe, and comment as well. Which do you think's the best? Did you enjoy? Did you have any of these when you were little? Would you have preferred it if Dinky had maybe done them so they floated, or quite happy with the fact that it just go on the carpet? But yeah, I'd like to know what you think of this range. As I say, I really like it, but just not sure, how much sort of all the collectors do. So yeah, as I say, please do like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.